This is a quick video for lesson 3 to go over some of the tools for object snaps. We've been working with these through the videos with the controls for running object snaps. At the bottom there we have the icon that looks like a box and the arrow next to it. We've been picking up these object snaps to draw our assignments. So we know that when there's a check mark in front of them, they're on and they're running, and they're always going to be used. And I went ahead and checked a few of these so that I can show you some of the commands. So for instance, when you are asked to select a point, like when you start the line command, you go close to the endpoint and you have a little box that shows endpoint, or the midpoint for a little triangle, or the intersection, you get this little X. And so centers of circles and quadrants, we've been working with these. We already looked at tangents, and perpendicular is kind of nice because when you use perpendicular and you draw a line, you'll be able to see that little perpendicular here object snap when you are drawing a line at a 90-degree angle to another one. A tangent we looked at when we drew the circles, and we drew another line that was tangent to those circles. If you type in the word point and enter and then just click in space, you've placed a point, and you can change the way that point looks with different point styles. But here, as long as I have node checked, when I start the line tool, or whenever you're asked for a point, when you go close to that point, you'll get the node. So node goes with the points. Nearest object snap is something I don't use very often, but it's a tool if you want to make sure that you're grabbing onto that line, but it's not real accurate. You just want it to snap to the line near this point. And parallel will help you to draw a line parallel to an existing one. So I start the line command, I click a point, I pull my mouse over to this line until I get the parallel object snap. I bring it over parallel, and here I'm able to continue the line here. I can even type in how long the line is. I'm going to go ahead and click, right click, and enter. Now these are all running object snaps, so you could turn them on and off here, but sometimes we want to use what's called an override. There are different ways of using overrides. One of the videos I showed you how to hold your shift key and press and let go of your right mouse button to get this menu. So let's say you're starting the line command and you want to snap to the center of a circle, but you don't want any of the other object snaps to be on. You can hold your shift key and your right mouse, click and let go of your right mouse button and pick center, and then notice here that everything else is turned off as far as an object snap goes, and just the centers are there. And then once you click, they all go back on. See, all these object snaps are back on. So it's a temporary override. I'm going to escape out of that. Another way of setting up toolbars in AutoCAD to access those overrides is to go up to the very top. I don't use this menu very often, but I know that it's available, and especially if you're using a Mac, you might want to pick up some of these toolbars. At the very top left, if you follow here this strip of icons in the quick access area of the screen, and you click on that little arrow pointing down, you can go all the way down to show menu bar. Showing the menu bar will give you another here line of menus. These are the older menus that were used and have been replaced with these tabs and panels. But in here you can go to tools and down to toolbars and over to AutoCAD and get all of these different toolbars that you can kind of dock on your screen, so that you have a combination of the ribbon, panels, and these toolbars. So temporarily here you can go ahead and pick object snap, And if you're using a Mac, you might want to open up a couple of these. It might be convenient to have the draw and the modify in your screen. I'll go ahead and pick Object Snap. So this is what a toolbar looks like. And you can pick them up here by holding your left mouse button down at the far left side and redocking it anywhere. And you can close it right here with the X. But these are the overrides that we're talking about. So now, if I wanted to start the line command and I only wanted the center Object Snap, you see how all of these other ones are on? I could pick here the center snap to center icon, and then notice everything is turned off, and I'm getting specifically that center. And now it will go back to all of them on. I'm going to go ahead and close out of this Object Snap toolbar, come back up to the top here, and pick Hide Menu Bar. So looking at these terms here, we already talked about the running mode, which relates to the object snaps that are on and running all the time, which would be these here. But if you type in options or right click and pick options, you can see here in the drafting tab, you have this aperture size. I generally leave it right here in the middle as the default, but it has to do with the distance between the object and where your pointer is to snap to that endpoint or midpoint. So let's just give it a try, and that I can show you visually here. So if this is really small, the aperture size, and I go ahead and start the line command, what happens when I get close to the endpoint, it doesn't show the object snap until I get really close. See, they're really close to it. So if you have a tight drawing that has a lot going on and you don't want all the other object snaps to be showing, you might adjust that. I haven't had to, but it's an option. If I right click and go back to options and change the aperture size way over here to the far right, now when I start the line command, you'll notice that I'm not even on top of it, and I'm at some distance away from it, and the object snap is showing, so I can select it away from the object snap and it will draw it to it like a magnet. That's the aperture. I'm going to right click and go back to options and change that back to about midway. I usually keep it there for all of my projects. You can also change the object snap marker size here. Under the selection tab, I'd just like to mention that there is a pick box size. So when you start the erase command, that little box that you use to select objects, this is the pick box size, and then you have the grip size and several other types of tools in this options dialog box. I'll go ahead and cancel out of that. As I scroll down and take a look at assignment 9, there are tools that are mentioned like limits, status, grid, ortho, and units. So let's go back and take a look. What is really limits? Limits is a pretty big subject, to be honest with you. There are at least 4 different things you can do. One thing that limits can do is help for printing. So some companies will type in limits and enter, and now you're asked for a lower left corner, which could be the bottom left corner of your border for your sheet, and it's typically 0,0. I'm going to go ahead and press enter. And then maybe your other corner of your paper might be maybe an 11 by 17. So that's the X comma Y. So I can type in 17 comma 11 for the other corner. Right now the default is 12 comma 9. So I'll type in 17 comma 11 and enter. Now nothing really shows here. But when you go to print, I'm going back up to the print dialog box right here. One of the options for what to plot is limits. So if you have your limits set at 0,0 for the bottom left corner of your paper and a 17,11 for the top right corner, then you can print everything that's within that limits. That's one of the many reasons we use limits. The other reason we use limits is for the grid. So if we turn the grid on, you can see with these newer releases that when you zoom in and out, the grid changes, and it's always constantly dynamic. But if we go down to the arrow next to here, the grid and the snaps, or we could just right click, let's do that, right click on the grid icon and pick grid settings. You may see an arrow in some of the older releases. We can get into this dialog box and take a look at some of the tools that we can change. So here's one here. This used to be turned off. Display grid beyond limits. So if I take the check mark out of display grid beyond limits, and I take the check mark out of this adaptive grid, which means it's going to change as you zoom in and out, and I pick OK, you'll see that the grid will only display within the limits, which could be good for you to get an idea of, there's your sheet right there, 11 by 17, because you set up your limits at 0,0 and 17,11 right here. And now by changing, here's some of the grid settings. We took out these check marks. We can display the grid within the limits. And also we have the grid spacing. So instead of using 0.5, I'm going to type in 1 for the grid, the X spacing, and 1 for the Y. You see how automatically it defaults as 1 to 1, but you could have them as different numbers. And when I pick OK, you'll see that the grid displays with 1 inch by 1 inch squares. But this has nothing to do with the snaps. So the snaps right next to it, and these are not object snaps, these are snaps. You can turn those on so that when you draw a line, you can see that your mouse is pulling to those snaps, and those snaps by default are 0.5. So you see how I have a grid that's 1 inch by 1 inch, but you can see that my mouse is going to snap to every 0.5 increments. If I escape out of that and right click and pick snap settings down here at the bottom, I can change also my snap X and Y spacing to 1 if I'd like it to be the same. And there are a lot of other displays here, but these are the basics. Let's go ahead and pick OK. Now when I start the line command, I'm snapping to 1 inch increments. So if you have a project that is based on specific increments, sometimes instead of picking a point and pulling your mouse and typing in 10 and enter, you can pull your mouse down here by these increments until you see 10 and click and enter. A different way of drafting, but something worth knowing about. Also, if I turn off those two, the grid and the snaps, I'm going to change here from polar tracking to ortho. Some people love to use ortho. I used to love ortho. I didn't think I'd ever not use it, but now I hardly ever use it. But I don't want to take anything out of the presentation, just show you all the tools because you might really like it. When you use polar tracking and you draw a line, you can see that you can set up these tracking vectors that will give you different angles and also give you 0, 90, 180, and 270. Making sure your tracking vector is showing, you can snap here to those straight lines. Now if you click on Ortho, which is right next to it, it will turn off the polar. But now when you start the line command, you are completely locked into 0, 90, 180, and 270. So if I pull my mouse to the right, I don't have to look for the tracking vectors. I know it's going to be straight and I can click. So the thing I might not like about this is that if I go over that line, you'll have to, when you're first starting out, know that you're drawing over that line if you're going here to 180. But it does help you to draw specific straight lines 0, 90, 180, and 270 without using the polar tracking. Maybe that works for you. It is a tool that we can use. I'm going to go back to the polar tracking and make that blue or on. Also, if you type in units and press enter, you can change the way that numbers display in the command line and the way that you type in measurements by changing the length type here at the top left. So right now it's decimal, and I'll give you an example. When I start the line command and I click a point and I pull my mouse to the right, notice that the numbers are all here and using decimals. So it's 4 places to the right, and even in this little tooltip here it says polar and then the number with 4 places to the right. When I want to find out how long a line is, we can use the measure tool called distance. So under utilities, find the measure tool that looks like a ruler. You won't have the quick command if you have an older release of AutoCAD, but distance will be in all of your programs. If you click on distance and you pick the beginning of the line and pick the end of the line, you'll find the distance between those 2 points. And notice again that in your command line or on your pointer or around the object, we're using decimals and we're using 4 places to the right. Now escape out of that, type in units and change your units to architectural and pick OK. Now when you start the line command and you click a point and you pull your mouse to the right, notice that you're looking at feet and inches. So you'll see all these inches and then it'll change to feet. And now I can type in 1 apostrophe, which is right next to the enter key, for 1 foot, and enter. There's my 1 foot line. Now we're going to be taking a look at floor plans and how to type in architectural units, but since we're here, if I type in 1 apostrophe 6 with no space, no dash, this would be representing 1 foot 6 inches. We never really need to type in the inches. I'm going to go ahead and press enter. If I need fractions, I can type in 1 foot 6.5 for ½ an inch, or I'm going to backspace and type in now the dash 1/2. So this would be if you wanted 1 foot 6.5 inches, and enter. I'll enter again or escape. Now when I use the utility called distance to pick 2 points to find out the distance between those 2 points, I'm going to click on the beginning of this line and the end of this line. You'll see in your command line it's 1 foot 6.5 inches. If I still had it on the default decimal, I would see here the decimal equivalent to this architectural scale. We'll come back to this when we work with floor plans. So in lesson 3, we have assignments 9 through 12. Assignment 9 is this written portion. You open up this drawing called 6th A and save it as your default assignment name. We've covered all of these object snaps pretty much, and limits. Status. So status is going to be a way to find out what the drawing status is. A lot of different information. You just type in status at the command line and enter, and here you'll find out all the digital portion of file size and the grid spacing and the current layer, the elevation, some of that information. We can also escape out of that and type in ID and enter, so that you can click on a point and find out what the XYZ is within this coordinate system. I would like to go back to this new tool. I think it's great. Underneath the utilities here, measure, they've added for this new release of AutoCAD this command called quick. When you start it and you kind of move your mouse around, you'll see that it definitely gives you some quick dimensions. So as you move your mouse around, it's already calculating and showing you the measurements that you need for your drawing. I'll escape out of that and scroll down here to show you that you'll be walking through this drawing that already has objects in it. So each one is going to now give you direction on how to complete it. Just do your best on that. And then there's a video instruction posted for assignment 10. And assignment 11 and 12 are very similar to what we've been doing. You can see that we're drawing lines at an angle. We're using polar array along with some trim commands, drawing circles. And then assignment 12 is the same, some offsets, some angles here to give you more experience with those tools. Now I just noticed that this says R, but it doesn't say what the radius is. If you come down here and take a look at this 0.25, it looks like that dimension is the dimension of the diameter. So if you take a look at assignment 11, it looks like the diameter for this circle is going to be 0.25. And the only assignment that is required to be dimensioned is this gasket, assignment 10. These two are not required to be dimensioned, but I would recommend that you try it out so that you can finish them for your portfolio. And we will be coming back to some of these assignments to dimension them when we start to talk about dimensions.